I'm Nico Suarez. I am doing training and tech support for Roland Europe, and we are here today in the Somersault Festival in Devon, and we have an M5000 here. The M5000 is the flagship model of the consoles in Roland we have today, and we're going to run you through some of the features it has. First of all, I'm going to introduce you the system we're using today. Is mainly the M5000, is the brain of the system. And the M5000 has two REAC ports. These two REAC ports, we call it REAC A and REAC B, are used to connect to the stage where we have I/O boxes. Here is the I/O box, is the thing we leave on the stage, and where we are going to connect all the inputs, all the microphones, and we're going to connect all the speakers using the outputs. This is part of the system and is so important, like the M5000 on the front of house. So both work together and both are complete the system. So the I/O box we're using here today is the S-4000S. It has been featured with 32 inputs and 8 outputs. But this one is very particular because actually you can design yourself the amount of inputs and outputs you need. You just have cards that have 4 channels or 4 inputs or 4 outputs that can be analog, like these ones, or can be ASA view. So you have this space for placing 10 cards, and then you just choose how you want to configure it. Today we have 32 inputs. This means 8 input cards, analog input cards, and 8 outputs, which means 2 output cards. More other options we have for I/O boxes. We have a smaller one, which is 24 inputs, 16 outputs, for example, a 2416. We have a 1608, which means 16 inputs, 8 outputs. And we have the smaller one we have, what we call the digital stage box, which is 8 inputs and 8 outputs. All those can work 96 kilohertz conversion, analog to digital and digital to analog. They can connect to any of the Roland consoles using the REAC. So we have a REAC port here, which is now connected to the REAC A on the front of house. And so the connection established between the I/O box and the front of house is just a Cat5 cable crossed from here to the mixer. That's it. Okay, so on the M5000 we have 2 REAC ports. It's the REAC A and REAC B. This means that we can go to 2 different I/O boxes in the stage. Right now, in this festival, with one, we have more than enough, so we are using REAC A for that. These LEDs telling us, is blinking very slowly, is telling us the connection is established and the connection is good. If it blinks faster or it's off, means that something happened. Okay, if it's blinking faster, probably something about configuration. If it's just off, means probably the cable is wrong. Okay, and this is the core technology inside the mixer, the REAC. We have REAC A, REAC B. This third REAC port is used to go for maybe for a monitor console, a REAC monitor console, or if you want to go to a recording on a computer or recording on our recorder, the R1000, or if you're going to go to our M48 system, which is basically a personal monitor mixer for each musician. You can run it through this REAC port. So once we have seen the system we are using today, I want to tell you what is especially different in this console compared to the other ones. So it's basically 3 main things. I show you the REAC protocol. We are running from the stage back to the console, but we know out there are more protocols. So we got, for example, Dante, we got MADI. Maybe we want to run plugins using Waves, sound card or something. So this console has REAC inside as a core technology because it's Roland's technology, but we place 2 expansions and slots on the back panel, and you're able to place a slot for Dante or a slot for MADI, and in the future you will be able to place a card to run your plugins into the system. So first important point on this console is this is open to more protocols. It's not just closed to the REAC protocol. Also, once you place expansion slot on a mixer, you are kind of future-proof. So whatever appears in the future, if it is important for the user, it's important in the market, we are sure that we will be able to introduce it on our console just using the expansion slot feature on it. We just create an expansion slot for it, and that's it. The second main point is that this console is 96 kilohertz processing. So everything on the system, from the I/O box to the mixer and back to the outputs on the I/O box, is running 96. We do the conversion on 96, we do the mixing on 96, and we send it out on the outputs on 96. On the previous consoles from Roland, the clock was 48 kilohertz. Okay, so the I/O boxes were working on 48 kilohertz, but now, just because the master control is on 96, all the I/O boxes boot up on 96 and are fully compatible with this console, and they can unveil all the power they have inside. And the third important point is what we call the configurable architecture. We see in the market that when you need to choose a console, you look into the specifications, and that's something that is fixed. You have a fixed amount of inputs and a fixed amount of auxiliaries, matrices, whatever. So we wanted to break that. We wanted to give to the user the ability to build that regarding the situation you have. So for that, we create a screen where you are going to control and you're going to decide how many inputs, channels, how many auxiliaries, how many buses you're going to use. So we give to you 128 audio definable paths, and it's up to you to balance these 128 between inputs and buses. So, couple examples. You can do 127 input channels and mix those down on a monobus. Very tricky to mix down all that. Or the other way around, you can do one input channel and use 127 matrix outputs to feed your speakers. That's what we call the Pope situation. So you have one person, one microphone, but a huge PA system. So you can control that. So those two examples are the boundaries of the technology, are very stupid examples, but give to you some idea of how you can modify actually and make changes on the block diagrams of the mixer itself. So let's get into the screen where we are going to control all these 128 channels. So for that, we press menu, and all the menu appears here on the right part of the screen. If you choose setup and mixer configuration, this brings you into a screen where you are going to set the power or split the power, split the 128 audio definable paths. This is the screen where you're going to say, okay, I need this amount of inputs, this amount of auxiliaries, this amount of matrices. So, for example, right now the console has 62 channel inputs. Imagine that a guest appear on the stage and I need another 3 channels suddenly. So for that, I have this section down here. I touch here, that opens numeric keyboard. I select 3 channels and add them. So right now, it's showing to me, instead of 62, I'm using 65. But I didn't do it yet. I have to press apply. Apply is blinking to tell me, okay, you need to press apply to make the changes. So I'm going to press apply now. And what happens is that the progress bar appears for 2 seconds, but I don't need to stop the sound. So actually I can add channels or take auxiliaries out. I can play around that screen during the show. I don't need to stop the sound, and I just lose the control for 2 seconds with the progress bar. So if you do that between songs or between bands, you don't have to be worried about that's going to create any noise or any silence. You can do that. So let's do another example to get enabled with that. So menu again, setup, mixer configuration, and right now let's do a different example. Let's do auxiliaries. So right now the console has 24 auxiliaries. Suddenly I need another in-ear monitor in a stereo. Okay, so I have just one, add them, 25, and I'm gonna make it stereo. When I make an auxiliary of a channel or an input channel or a mix minus bus or a subgroup, when I make it in the stereo, it takes out 2 of our audio definable paths. So stereo for us means 2 channels. And again, like the other example, I press apply, a progress bar appears for 2 seconds. This means I lost the control for 2 seconds, but again, I don't need to stop the PA. I can just still running the show without stopping it. So once we already see the system and we did the configuration of the amount of input and amount of buses we're going to use, it's time to navigate across the console. How we're going to manage all that and how we're going to control all that from the hardware. Okay, so we place 3 banks of 8 faders. It's exactly the same bank 3 times, okay? And the screen is going to show you 8 channels at the same time. Which 8 channels? Okay, right now we're showing the 8 channels on the center bank. If I want to move to another bank, just selecting one of the channels that belong to the bank, the whole screen will move to this new bank. So basically the screen is going to follow wherever you're working. Selecting one channel, it will bring you the information you're working on. Okay, so how I move across the channels. On these 3 banks, they have the same buttons, so you can control the 3 banks just from any of them. Okay, so by default, or the way that we navigate, that we call it by default, is scrolling. So we have 2 main layers. The first layer is about input channels, and the second one is about DCAs and buses. Okay, so right now we are on input channels, and I have channel 1 and channel 24. If I want to move to get more channels, what I have to do is to press a scroll. No matter which scroll, I can touch any of them. So if I press it once, I move 8 channels. So channel 1 is out now, this is number 9 now, and this is 32. So if I keep hitting scroll, I'm moving to the right, so I'm scrolling 8 by 8 to the right or to the left. So it's a way that we are going to navigate horizontally on the channels. That's for the inputs. If I change here to the DCA and buses, the scrolling function is the same one. I'm just hitting the arrow on the right, I'm scrolling the buses to the right, and if I hit the left arrow, I'm scrolling the buses to the left. Okay, these 2 is the basic navigation, is what we call the default mode, or what we call the scroll function. But there are more ways to navigate on the faders. For example, we have 3 user banks, okay, and these 3 user banks are up to you to configure it, and you can mix input channels with DCAs, with auxiliaries, with masters, wherever you want to do on your user layer is for you, to the user, to choose. Okay, let's see more ways. Right now the 3 banks are connected, but maybe I want to have different setups or different things on different banks. For that is the isolation. So if I hit the isolation button on the banks, now each bank is independent of the other 2. Okay, so right now I can have, for example, one person dedicated here working on the microphones, and one other person working here maybe focus on the playbacks, on the BTRs if we are in a broadcast situation, or the CD players, or the musics between bands. Okay, if I take the isolation out of these 2 banks, now these 2 banks work together, and this is the only one that is isolated. In this particular situation, I can change here from inputs to DCAs. So I have now DCAs 1 to 8, and I have here channel input channels. So this first one is the DCA I have addressed to the drums. If I hit the selection button twice, it opens the channels that belong to the DCA. If I change here for the keys section, I have the key channel here. Back to drums. So it's a different way to navigate. It's more like if you have folders and each folder has some files inside, but instead of files there are input channels. So it's a little bit more different way of recalling the channels you're working on. Okay, on top of that, we develop another way to navigate across the channels. Imagine a situation where you have an orchestra and you are using 100 input channels. If you're having 100 input channels and you want to move very fast from channel number 3 to channel number 92, if you have to do that through the scrolling, that will be a lot of a scroll to do. So what we develop is a function called the anchors. Anchors work like a bookmark you set on a book. So you're reading a book and the important pages, you set a bookmark for it. This is the same thing but for channels. You have 100 channels, but there are some important ones. Maybe the first one of the section, the first violin, the first cello, the first percussion. You're going to set an anchor on them. You're going to set a bookmark on them. And then you're going to recall them. So let's see a little bit in detail how we are going to set the anchors and how we recall them. Okay, so to place an anchor, to place a bookmark, what we do is to press the function button. And this changes what the selection button of each channel are going to do. So right now, we have some options. The last one is called set anchors. That's what we want to do. So I select this, and now I'm back on the channels, but all of them, they have an orange box on the lower part that's going to allow me to choose which channels you want to place a bookmark on, or which channels you want to place an anchor on. So for the example, I'm going to place on the bass guitar, on the keyboards, and on the returns of my reverbs and delays. So the first channel I placed an anchor on was the bass guitar, the second one is the keyboards, and the third one is the returns of the FX section. I'm going to turn off the function, which is blinking to remember me you're doing something here. Don't forget to press to get off this. So I press it, I get off. So I just set which channels are going to be with the bookmark, which channels are going to be easy to recall. So now it's time to recall them. To do that, the same scroll buttons I mentioned before about the navigation, you press them twice at the same time. So you press them together, and this brings down here the bookmarks, the anchors. So now, if I select, for example, the third anchor, which if you remember were the returns of the FX, that's going to recall in this bank the first fader for the channel you place the anchor on. So if we imagine this example about an orchestra with 100 channels, if you place an anchor at the beginning of each section, this means that you will very easily to jump from sections across the sections just with 2 clicks. You press 2 scroll buttons together, and then you select the bookmark you want to recall. So if you place your bookmark wisely during the sound check, all the channels, no matter how many channels you have, are just 2 clicks away. The 2 scroll and selecting the anchor. So, on top of this fader work we have seen that you can choose whatever you like to, or depending on the moment you are facing, you can choose different way of works with a fader. We place 4 faders that are for you to choose which channels are important. So by default, this last one, the 4th one, is the master. But if you remember the configurable architecture, maybe you are not going to have any master. Maybe you're going to have just auxiliaries because you're doing monitors, so you don't need the master. So by default is the master if you have one, but it can be addressed to a different thing. So let's do an example. Imagine that in this situation here today, the guitar is very important to me. This is the guitar. So I want to place the guitar on one of these 4 faders to always have it on my right hand. Okay, I need to have quick access to the guitar, so I need to place the guitar on one of these 4. So for that, I press the function button, and then the first option is assign fader. So I choose assign fader is what I want to do, and then the mixer is asking me which fader of these 4 you want to assign. Let's choose the first one. Now, after I did that, all the rest of the channels have the words 2 faders underneath of the screen. So just selecting the channel now, the guitar sends the guitar here. Okay? The last thing I have to do is to turn off the function that's still blinking to tell you you're doing things here. So turn this off. And now I have the guitar on this channel, but also I have a mirror, I have a copy of the channel on my right hand. So no matter where I am on the rest of the 24 faders, the guitar is important. It's going to always be on my right hand, ready to tweak and ready to make changes on. Okay, let's do another example another time. So function, assign fader, let's choose the second one now, that fader, and then back on the regular bank, I'm going to choose now the keyboard. The keyboard is important, I'm going to send the keyboard there. So I choose it, it went there, I turn the function off, and now I have the keyboards here and the guitar here. So if you're doing a show where the guitar and the keyboards are very important, Pink Floyd maybe, so you have those 2 on your right hand, very quick access and very easy. So we just seen these 4 faders are for you to choose the important things. In the same way, we have on top of this, on this part here, we have 4 knobs and 8 buttons and 3 banks. So this means in total 12 knobs and 24 buttons that are for you to choose also important things. Let's do an example. Imagine that this is the guitar. We said it's very important to us, and maybe it will be great if I have on this knob here the threshold of the compressor of this guitar. So let's do that. So I hold the display button, I hold it for 2 seconds, and it starts to blink. Okay. Now this section is active to be address things and parameters into it. So I want to address the first knob, which is the knob letter A. I tweak it, and on the screen says assign. So whatever you're doing, you're going to send it to this knob. And now on the screen you see that everything gets an orange square. So I get into the compressor of the guitar, and you see all these orange squares. I just select the threshold, and from now on, this knob controls the threshold on the screen for the guitar. Okay? Let's do another example. If this was the keyboard, maybe I want this keyboard to be, I need this button number 2 to open the EQ of the key section. So for that I just hold this, I touch it, and it says assign on the screen. I just select the EQ part of the keyboard, and now if you see, the window has an orange square. So this means that I can recall from the button a particular window, this one. And now, no matter where I am on the screen, every time I press this button, it's going to open the EQ screen of the key. So, which functions you can address into this user assignable section? It can be parameters of a channel, it can be recalling screens, it can be recall a send some fader, it can be recalling a graphic EQ, a particular graphic EQ, it can be recalling a reverb or a delay, it can be a variety of things, wherever you need to have quick access to it. So for example, my advice, how I use them, is the first bank, I use it related to the faders I have below it. The second bank, I use it more related with the FX section, the tap tempo, open the reverb, or changing some auxiliary levels of the things I'm sending to the reverbs and delay. And the third bank, I use it more related to the graphic EQs and the setup settings or limiter on the master. So that's just an advice of how I use them, but it's user assignable. So this means that you have the decision of what are you going to place on these 4 faders, these 4x3 knobs, and these 8x3 buttons.